Welcome to the Fortrea podcast. This is episode 1 of our series Driving Productivity in Biotech Clinical Trials. How to maximize valuation for minimal cost. In this episode, we explore a critical question. Are you focused on regulatory approval or on maximizing value? Your answer could determine the path your clinical trial takes and the outcome it delivers. Today we're joined by an exceptional group of speakers. We have Tracy Newbold, Vice President of Clinical Operations at Lexicon Pharmaceuticals, Athreya, SVP and Global Head of Clinical Operations for Fortrea, and Alaric Jackson, Chief Technology and Data Officer at Fortrea. Guiding today's discussion is our moderator, Dr. Ken Park, VP of R&D Strategy and Innovation Consulting for Fortrea. Dr. Park, over to you.
So, hello everyone. Today we're discussing how to drive productivity in biotech clinical trials, and in particular, how do you maximize valuation for minimal investment? So historically, R&D productivity has always been an area of focus and priority for the industry, but recent trends are particularly challenging. How do you actually realize this ultimate goal? And part of it is that protocols are becoming increasingly complex. Part of that is due to increasing number of total endpoints that are being measured in a clinical trial, more visits, more sites being involved, and we're asking more of the patients when they're going in for their site visits. We're doing more procedures and doing more measurements on them. All of this translates into increased time, increased costs, and this gets further compounded by the rising global costs over the last 5 years, as well as by recent market uncertainties. So how does this translate for a typical biotech? Well, part of it has to do with what is your exit strategy as a biotech. Most biopharma focus on registration and they focus on regulatory success. And as a result, what they're really trying to drill down into is how do they convince a buyer or a potential licensing partner that number one, their drug works, or that number two, that their drug is likely to be approved. And within that, they're trying to balance their cost and time and effort in order to demonstrate those two proof points. And so how you think about this differs depending upon whether or not you're thinking about exiting immediately post POC, sometime between phase 2 and phase 3, or if you're looking for a commercialization partner sometime between phase 3 and launch. But it begs the question, how does large pharma think about licensing an asset from a biotech, or how do they think about a biopharma's valuation? And it's more complicated for a large pharma than simply, is this drug approvable by a regulatory agency? They're thinking about a more complicated equation that includes what's your forecasted revenue? How does that combine against your likelihood of success? How does that get discounted based upon additional costs, time, and risks in order to successfully bring your drug to market? And of course, while a lot of that has to do with the ability to bring it to market from a regulatory approval standpoint, the other elements that they're also thinking through are the commercial elements. Are there competitors who are also coming into the space? What does this look like if a competitor gets to market first? Beyond just demonstrating that you can successfully bring your drug to through regulatory approval, are you able to demonstrate value to a payer? Will a government payer or a private insurance company be willing to pay for your product? And how much research has been done into those areas already by you as a biotech? And if you haven't done it, then how much risk does a large pharma carry if they then license your asset? And also, how much do they have to spend in order to de-risk or answer those questions about your commercial viability? So at Fortrea, when we think about productivity across clinical trials, we really think about it from the very earliest phases around How do you plan for the clinical trial? How do you design it? Who's your target population? And what are you trying to demonstrate? All the way through startup, enrollment, project delivery, all the way through close. And across our organization, this is, of course, an important topic. We've done an internal inventory. We have over 400 initiatives that are currently ongoing or have recently been completed that are entirely focused around how do we improve productivity throughout our organization so that we can deliver more effectively for our clients and so that our clients can end up with a more productive clinical trial as well. And when we've done rough estimates of the impacts of multiple stages of productivity initiatives, what we can see is that these types of innovations, they can drive significant cost savings of 40% or higher when fully applied across a clinical trial program. So while this is a big topic, the opportunity and the impact from this is also potentially huge. And for a biotech, personally, when I think about this and put myself into a biotech's shoes, a lot of the big question for them does come back to this issue of, are you focusing on regulatory approval? Or are you focusing on value maximization? And the road that you end up taking ends up making a significant difference. I am so delighted to be able to bring today this august group of speakers, of panelists, including Tracy, Terry, and Alaric. And with that, we will transition to our panel discussion. So Tracy, Terry, and Alaric, thank you so much for agreeing to participate as our panelists today. I thought that maybe we would start off with a pretty straightforward question, namely, for each of you, what does productivity as a term mean to you within your context? And for this question, maybe we start with Tracy and then Terry and then finish with Alaric.
Sure. Thank you, Ken. Hi, everyone. So productivity for a small biotech where I am currently can mean really everything. We have it's low revenue generating. We have to really start with the end in mind. We have to be super thoughtful about our key performance indicators. What are we measuring? What are we measuring against? And how are we doing? And I think ultimately pacing these KPIs at a rate where we have a chance to actually mitigate and change course, as trials often have to do.
Yeah. So Tracy, just kind of jumping off with that, having the operational perspective and also working really closely with you throughout the years, there's a little bit of difference when it comes to productivity with maybe a large pharma or biotech. But first, to answer the question with regards to what does productivity mean for me, it doesn't mean cutting corners, and it doesn't mean trying to go faster. I mean, we all know the term work smarter, not faster. It's really about cutting out the friction and risk mitigating. We've all been chasing that penultimate right the first time over the years. And for me, working with biotech, it's really, really important to be right the first time. A small mistake, error, can cause great inefficiency when delivering. So when I look at productivity, it's really honestly going back to the good old management of time, cost, and quality. And how do you actually accelerate or go as fast as you can while not actually having issues with your quality? And for biotech companies, when you think about quality and productivity, one of the things as a CRO and, really focused on project management is, you have a process, you standardize it, it becomes repeatable, then you optimize it. And you see that more and more with maybe large pharma, where they do have standard process you follow. And out of that, you get high quality and acceleration. But sometimes when we're in this more fast fast agility area of biotech, we have to do things a little bit differently. So we have to kind of hybridize how we standardize the process. We need to work with our biotech companies to, assess risk and understand where we should remain in process and where we may want to go outside a process for a different and faster result. But it is all about managing the triple constraint for me, and it's really not it's making sure your eye is always on the ball, and that you're just managing very tightly.
Well, I think from a technology point of view, I'll bring a different perspective. So if you think like technology productivity, as a developer, it might be number of lines of code shipped, a week or something like that. Or if you're an IT help desk person or support person, it would be number of tickets closed. But where we are now, those metrics still really matter from a productivity point of view. But now there's a much more increase on quality and actually how much time is freed up for innovation. And so efficiency is becoming a much bigger play in the technology space, because if you think about where technology plays, a lot of times in biotech and pharma, it's a support function. And so fundamentally, you have to make sure that the systems operate smoothly so as that you're not impacting adversely the operational teams. And then the other side of technology in biopharma and pharma is actually innovation. What can technology do to accelerate the pipeline? And so by being able to kind of carve out more time for your team to innovate, that actually helps deliver the pipeline as well as improve the efficiency of the tech team as well.
Thank you so much. Tracy, you start off by talking a little bit about how you work backwards from what is it that you're trying to achieve, your end goal and objective. How do you actually try to balance, or how does a biotech try to define the difference between a near-term opportunity or a near-term objective versus your long-term exit strategy?
Sure. And that's a great question, because sometimes those two aren't very far apart, given how much time we have and what our budget is, and being beholden to multiple stakeholders, where we're having to publicly disclose at certain milestones. So we're just as thoughtful as we can be about near term, and we have to be careful too, because there is this, and I know Terry talked about this as well, but this kind of tendency to try to do things as quickly as possible. And I don't think I've seen a time yet where we haven't had to self-correct for making that decision. So it's really managing expectations, and being able to do it right the first time, so that we can accomplish near-term goals as soon as possible, but the right way, in order to achieve that long-term goal, which oftentimes, if you don't do it thoughtfully, that ends up getting pushed out.
And Terry, you mentioned a little bit about right the first time, and Tracy, you echoed that same term. I know that some of our experience has been that choices in both protocol design as well as in site selection, or even sometimes seemingly innocuous choices around how data is collected during a particular visit, can sometimes end up snowballing into a much bigger deal later on when we realize that it wasn't right that first time and an amendment has to be applied. Terry, can you share a little bit more about that right the first time, and maybe an example of a time when it went well as opposed to a time when it didn't?
Yeah, I can certainly talk to that. Right the first time, as I say, is really, really important. And, coming from a CRO and owning the boots on the ground, heading up our operations, I have the people that are going to make the mistakes. So, I know we want to talk about how it works. And I think, what I'm seeing, and I've been in this industry since 1992. So I've gone from paper to digital. I mean, yesterday we were talking about how much we loved Excel and pivot tables and now Power BI and all of our dashboards. But every time we make these transitions to innovation, we get closer to right the first time. So for me, it's about taking kind of the human element and error out of something. And, one of the things, common mistakes you see, which you wonder why it's common, but again, it's human error. We all are error prone, right? Is just simple things like informed consent and submitting it to the regulators. And there's a lot of copying and pasting, and you're in lots of countries and sites, and they have their own language, and someone forgets to put or leave in something about genetic sampling. It happens all the time, or the PK samples. And then it goes in, it gets approved, and then we realize it's cut out and we have to start all over again. And that becomes really inefficient. Where I've seen technology really help me and my team is using some of our AI technology to actually re-review our documents and make sure that we're not missing crucial information. And, not only does it help with ensuring right the first time, and I've seen it like in a lot of regulatory documents, and you can actually loop protocols and your IB and your ICF together and kind of come up with this information. But it also speeds up the process. So, it's catching things that the human eye can't catch, but it's also doing things like, for example, within my contracts group, we run a QC check where it used to take 45 minutes to QC a document to make sure that the right elements are in there, which could, you could have human error in because you're doing that. And it's gone from, 40 minutes, 45-minute review to a 5-minute review. And then co-pilot, co-intelligence that we talk about, you can't just let AI and ML do it on their own, but you do a review, but it just cuts down things so fast. But where I see the best results is that it's cutting down on the human error, and the human error, it can be very costly.
Alaric, would love to hear from you for a moment. From the technology perspective, I know that you and your team are always looking for the productivity areas that are hardest for the organization to crack, and where technology can make a big difference. Can you give an example or an experience of an area of productivity that's particularly challenging that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole site visit process, what's involved for a CRA to go to a site, to meet with the investigator, to monitor the data. There's so many data touch points, right? And the challenge there is, as well as it's not just you turn up on site and you execute it. There's a whole lot of preparation that goes on before it, where you're reviewing the notes from the previous visit, and that takes time. So one of the things we're looking to do is optimize that CRA experience so that, imagine a world where you can converse with, natural language, say, okay, I was on Dr. Smith's site last week or last month monitoring the study. What were the key actions, right? And that conversely coming back to you quickly. So that's a big area where what that then means is the CRA can spend more quality time with the investigator and build a relationship with the site and focus on the really high import issues. I mean, monitoring data is critical as well, as it always is, but fundamentally this way you're freeing up more time, not just for the CRA, but also for the investigator as well, because we know how difficult it is for them or their research assistant to get time. And I think that the site visit element is somewhere where it has been tough. We've moved to more remote visits, especially with COVID in recent years and things like that. But it's still a big area of opportunity for us to improve further the experience of all the constituents there.
And Alaric, to add on to that and how we're looking and digitizing, I really like where we're going with kind of our persona I can't say that word, digital phase. And, for me in operations, being able to use our data in different ways is really, really important. And it's important for me for our clients, like with Tracy. As simple as resource allocation and being able to be more predictive of having the right person in the right place at the right time, with the ability to actually ramp up in the way. I mean, it's very common. We have a lot of labor shortages, ups and downs in this industry. One of the biggest complaints you'll hear always with CROs is just, resource allocation and having those people. And so, having that data and being able to use it in kind of different angles really is helpful for me. And it helps become or create kind of a efficient operating model for our clients.
Please stay tuned for episode 2 of Driving Productivity in Biotech Clinical Trials. How to maximize valuation for minimal cost, where we will discuss innovative approaches to enhance productivity within clinical trials, focusing on the use of technology and data-driven strategies.